Welcome to the Love Examined playlist. We're solving love one song at a time. Okay, welcome back everyone to the Love Examined playlist podcast. How Soon Is Now by the Smiths, by the way, was voted the #1 song, I believe, of the 1980s, if I'm remembering correctly, when we had like New Year's Eve 1989 on CFNY 102.1, and all of us were betting which song would be the top of the 80s, and thankfully I won the round. So yeah, How Soon Is Now. Why did you pick this song? You just alluded to it being one of the best songs of all time. Really?
Well, I mean, this is just one of these songs. It's kind of like, first of all, we're going back to my favorite era. I think people who listen to our podcast know my favorite era. And really, when you think about our music that stays with us, adolescence is the time that whatever you were listening to that stuck will stick the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, if you were born in an era where there was crappy music, but I don't think the 80s was crappy. I think the music was great. This is one of these songs. I'm trying to think of other ones. Shout by Tears for Fears is another one where from the lyrics to the music to the way it builds to the chorus, everything, it just, if there's such a thing as pop perfection, I just think that How Soon Is Now is one of these songs. But for me, the reason why I said to you, and by the way, Ellie, you and I are both Smiths fans. We've talked about this before. I could have picked so many of Morrison's lyrics to go with, but the reason why I picked this one, I know it's a cliche because it's a popular song of theirs. Although, side note, Johnny Marr, the guitarist from the Smiths, claims that this song, when they released it, it was their producer or their manager said, it's so far removed from anything you've done. I don't know what to do with this song.
That it was so far removed from anything that was on the radio at the time. It was utterly different. And I think that's partly what made it iconic. But yeah, interesting.
Now, I have to say personally, and I do like a lot of the Smiths music. The production of this is still my favorite. There's a sonic quality to it that I think a lot of the other Smith songs are more dry, I guess is one way to think about it.
Or even a little more acoustic, whereas it has this ambient quality. The guitar, that sort of sounds like someone sawing their guitar like throughout the whole thing, which is so cool.
Well, he does this thing, and until YouTube was a thing, I tried to figure it out myself as a guitarist, and I couldn't. And now with YouTube, there are people who show how he did it. That which is a slide. He used the slide. They reversed it and they put on a harmonizer effect onto it. Just beautiful stuff. Anyways, the reason why I picked it I almost said pop parenting. That's our other podcast.
Our old podcast.
That's our old podcast. The reason why I picked it for the Love Examined playlist is the lyrics that really became an anthem for me when I was an adolescent and a young adult, about the longing and the pain of going to clubs, of going out with my friends, the hope that this night will be different than the previous weekend. And this will be the night that I will meet someone. Such a powerful thing when you're in your late teens or early 20s, if you're single anyways. And Ellie, I was just thinking, just to give some details for those who are listening from the 80s, you'll understand. If you're not, this actually is what happened. I don't know for you, Ellie. Now you were cooler than I was. Let's be honest. You were. So what I'm saying, you might not have done.
Perhaps in my own mind, but yes.
Well, from pictures I've seen.
No, definitely not.
So here was my rituals for going out in the late 80s. So first of all, it starts with trying to suntan during the day with a lot of oil. Okay. So you sit there and you're thinking, okay, it's Saturday. I'm going to take the sun, get a nice sunburn. So you do that and you look at the mirror and you think nothing changed. So you're pretty bummed out. But then you take your shower, get into your shower. Come on. Then you put your mousse. You start with mousse. So I put mousse in my hair and then mousse and then gel. right? And then you put your gel, and I try to spike my hair, and then hairspray. By the time I was finished, if you lit a match in the bathroom, my head would explode. I had so much product in my hair that I could walk into a door.
That's the 80s. We all did.
Then I would put on put on my jeans, and I would safety pin my jeans from is it the hem? No, where does it go
No,
to the
from
ankle?
like just from like mid calf down.
Right. Did you do
Right.
that? Did you use the pins?
Yeah, but we had like, we didn't do it with jeans. We did it with workman's pants, like painter pants. That was the
I told
thing.
you were, yeah, that was more of like the goth kind of like thing. They were like gray or black, right? Those pants.
Yeah, but there was also like a pop kind of preppy thing, I think, from like the more English, like Wham kind of look, right? So we would use these like almost like a light blue kind of painter pant. It was so strange, but yes, we pinned all of our pants.
Oh, this is great. What was that, Ellie? What was that store? Not Le Chateau. What was the store with all the pastel colors in malls? They don't have them anymore. If you said it, I would know it. They had all the pastel 80s. I think it was more for girls than guys. It'll come to me. Anyways, so then you safety pin everything up. By the time I got into my car, I barely could move because my head was probably wrapped in all of this product, and my legs were too tight with safety pins. And the truth is, if I moved one way, I'd explode. Get into the car, pick up my friends, and then you get to the bar, and I just remember that experience of excitement and hope being dashed within about 5 minutes of walking to the club, going, everybody here is this, has the same sort of longing that I do, right? And there are better looking people than me here, more extroverted people. And then I would stand in the same bloody corner with my same bloody friends, listening to Rock Me Amadeus by Falco. Remember that? Remember? Or 99 Luftballons in German, and you're trying to sing along in German. And then of course, you drive home and you're single again. And then every now and then How Soon Is Now would come on. And for me, the lyric that just resonated with me at such a profound level is, the one, if you know the song, the lyric. There's a club, if you'd like to go, you could meet somebody who really loves you. So you go and you stand on your own, and you leave on your own, and you go home when you cry and you want to die. And it was, that song was like a good friend. It was like a good friend with me at 1 a.m. when I was alone again. And it was like this, I didn't know who Morrissey was, but it was like, you get me, you understand where I am. Although I have to say, I found the way Morrissey ends that stanza was a tad depressing, because I did not feel like I wanted to die. I just couldn't figure out how this is going to work. And that was, we were just talking just before the call, Ellie, about fathers and sons. And that's where, because of my distance from my father when I was a teenager, and my connection with my adolescent friends who were boys, there was no wise elder to tell me a few things here: that your hopelessness is a feeling, is not a fact. Right. And that how many people really meet people in a club? Like I think of all my friends who got married, Ellie, all my high school friends who are married now, right? Or who are in a relationship, or who are divorced. Right. How many of them really, their origin story is, I was in a club dancing. Right. Right. Looked at a girl across the room, or a guy, or whatever, right? Our eyes met, like in Swingers. You ever see the movie Swingers? Heather, what's her face?
But even for that matter, like not marriage, like even boyfriends and girlfriends. Like when I think about how much time I spent in clubs in my teens and early 20s, like so many of us, we never met our people in clubs. You met people in clubs, but you didn't generally date them and create relationships with them and things like that. So I think that was usually school or work or through other friends. So I think it's interesting what you're saying.
Yeah. And look, I mean, full disclosure, one of the primary reasons I wanted to become a musician is because I made the sort of logical leap. Well, who are meeting people. Whenever we went to Peel Pub in Montreal and there was a band, it seemed to me anyways, that when the band finished their set, they were meeting people. Right? Like people come up to them and speak to them. And I'm like, I got to get into a band, because that's the way to do it.
Right.
Now what I didn't realize it's funny, Ellie, when I finally got into a band, what I didn't realize is the people who are into the band are into lead singers and drummers, not so much the lead guitar player. So I was once again I missed the boat. Anyways, there's a couple of other lyrics. I'm curious to hear from you. I know when I shared the song with you, your first reaction on WhatsApp to me was, which is funny. I am the sun and the air, and I was like, yes. So what is it about this song? Listening to it in 2022 for you? Anything jump out for you that you want to share?
Yeah, I think for me, the reason that those first few lines, especially where he says, I am the sun and the air of a shyness that is criminally vulgar. I
So
mean,
good.
look, he's just the prince of emo. So it's amazing just in that, right? But I would say looking and hearing people talk today about the depth of loneliness that people are experiencing, the depth of people's anxiety that they're experiencing and social anxiety, and they're not knowing, like, how am I ever going to meet someone if I can barely talk to people and I'm incredibly shy and I'm incredibly socially anxious and desperately want to have people in my life or a person in my life who's special and connective. And so I think he speaks to that conundrum that social media has not made better, that dating apps have not made better, that certainly the pandemic has not made better. That there are still people now, 40 years later since this song came out, who are suffering from feeling, a shyness that is criminally vulgar and want desperately to find love. So to me, that's what this song speaks of. And that is so relevant to today.
Now, I have to say, as someone who I met my wife Elisa. We met online. I also found the tools before I met Elisa pretty disheartening. And this was back in the early 2000s when I was using those tools. And I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too deep, but there's a great TED talk by Dr. something Schwartz about the problem of too much choice.
Dr. Barry Schwartz, The Paradox
Thank
of
you.
Choice. Yeah,
The
it's an
paradox of
excellent
choice.
talk.
And so that is its own conundrum and something that is an issue for the ages. One of the things that I think that we can talk about is what's the stuff that we can control, because we can't. I don't think you can control the internet. I think that is that ship left the port a long time ago.
And that's just a symptom anyways. It's not really like the issue.
Right. And so one of the things that he says here that he touches on that is a theme in our podcast, I am the sun and the air. So what do we inherit? What do we inherit? Now, he seems to suggest he's inheriting a shyness that is criminally vulgar. And I was thinking, what do we inherit from our families, and what sets the tone for receiving love and giving love? In other words, I was thinking about this. What do we see from our primary caregivers, our parents' marriage, our grandparents, our uncles and aunts, how they handled love, how they handled distance, how they handled conflict, all of those things, right? We absorb like a sponge. And just to, not to plug my book, but just it was mentioned in an article this week that I posted onto Facebook on a Medium, which, by the way, I connected with the writer, and she wants to do something on a whole article on commitment phobia. So we're going to be speaking next week, which is very cool. Anyways, awesome. But this idea of, is there anything that we can do to rework or rethink the stuff that that gets passed down to us? Now, I think there is. I mean, I couldn't be a family therapist. I didn't think there was. So where Morrissey seems to be suggesting this is a fait accompli, right? That I've inherited something and there really isn't anything you can do about it. I mean, I think Morrissey generally, I find when you read his lyrics, he's a pretty glass half empty kind of a guy. Yeah. Although, interestingly, I've heard he what's that called, Ellie? He exaggerated for effect. He was androgynous and stuff, but people who knew him said that he's not nearly as, and Warhol did the same thing. Warhol would,
it's part of the art. You become the art that you create. You sort of become a part of that narrative or that story. And but that's so interesting also what you're saying, that that how much of that shyness is inherited. Because I do, when you do mention that, I do see that there is, and certainly when you feel that something's inherited, then you feel like it's just genetically out of my control. There's nothing to be done about it. I'm going to be like this for the rest of my life.
Look, this just happened this morning, and thankfully my kid doesn't listen to this podcast, so I can talk about it. We were talking about my eldest son, who is a bit of an introvert, has a little tiny group of friends. We're talking about his birthday party. What does he want to do for his birthday? Which brings up anxiety for me. And as I'm sitting in the car, I'm noticing, and this is a big thing with family systems therapy, is that the first part of any change is noticing your own anxiety before you start focusing on your kid. It's a big thing in family systems therapy. So I'm noticing in the car as we're talking about this, I am getting filled with a wave of anxiety. And it's all going back to likely whatever my parents were reacting to when I was planning my birthday parties when I was a kid, about no one showing up and all that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to control it, and keep things neutral. But I would like to think that because I have a more open relationship with my son than my father had with me at my son, who's 11 at his age, we were able to sit in the car and we were able to talk about this shyness that is criminally vulgar. My kid's an introvert and he orients books, but there's a part of him that doesn't want to accept it. There's a part of him that wants to connect with friends. And how do you keep a conversation going with your child that's a bit more neutral, not telling them what to think? So not doing something like some parents, who needs parties? They're always, which is about the parental anxiety being thrown onto the kid, or the opposite. You're going to have a party, you're going to like it, and you're going to get over this fear. How do you stay in that neutral ground, right, to provide options for a child to take responsibility for their disposition? Because I don't think, Ellie, maybe you have a different opinion. I'm kind of curious to know what you think. My thinking about dispositions is you can't change them in a radical way, meaning that if you're more of an introvert and that's your general disposition, right, it's not something you go and cure. It's something you work with, right? And it's that balance where you don't allow your internal fear to build a cocoon and a cast around the wound and then protect yourself for the rest of your life. But on the other hand, you don't beat the living crap out of yourself and try to be something that you're not. It's a delicate balancing act. I'm not sure what your thoughts are around this.
Look, I think as much as we also have physical genetic predispositions in terms of what our bodies are like, I don't think we would ever say that there's nothing we can change about our body. It's just you would have to decidedly turn your attention to, here's what I would like it to be like. Now, what are all the things that I could do that would help me get as close as I possibly can to that? So I think you may always have a predisposition towards something, but you can most certainly apply yourself and turn your attention to, I would like to be able to have conversations with people. I would like to be able to feel comfortable around groups of people and know that I can ask questions and be curious and not feel inauthentic, but because I feel confident in my skills, and then you're putting skills together with your disposition, and that will be, sort of your unique way of connecting with people as an introvert. So I think that the difficulty is you have to be willing to do the work, just like fitness, just like getting healthy. You have to be willing to put in the time, the attention, the commitment, and the work to saying, here's where I'd like to get to, finding out what you need to do to get there, and then actually doing it. That would be my sort of take on that. I think there are certain predispositions, of course, and for some people it'll be easier and some people it's harder, but I think there's so much more possibility than we necessarily know.
The other thing that I was thinking about with this, there's a club you like to go and you can meet someone who really loves you. When if you when you're 20, or let's say late teens to 20, there's sort of like a uniform way that you meet people. Everybody does the same sort of a thing. And what no one told me, and I wish someone would have told me, is that not everybody meets people this way. There
Mhm.
are other ways people meet. It took me a long time to
Right.
understand that actually the best way to meet someone is to go do something as a vocation or a hobby, and you will meet other like-minded people there,
Yeah, it's
and it
huge.
will become more organic. But no one told that to me. The narrative was that you spend hours fussing yourself up, and it's all really about looks at that point, right? Because it's very, clubs are a very Darwinistic sort of a thing, right? And that could have been very helpful for me. I didn't, when this
Yes.
song really touched me very deeply, I didn't even
Mm.
know there was another option to meet people at the time. Again, this is this old idea that my late supervisor would come around again. When you don't have wise elders in your life, you have to come up with answers on your own when you're a young person.
Correct.
And it's young people sharing with other young people, the blind leading the blind
Hmm.
around this sort of a thing, which really does become a problem. The next line I just think, first of all, the way Morrissey's, is it intonation, the way you say
Hmm.
words,
Yeah.
intonation, it's just so, it's just so great. And especially given our era that we're in right now, how many people could use this? You shut your mouth. First of all, I just, when I hear that, I just want to walk around. I can't do it, Ellie, but man, I'd love to just walk around and tell people, you shut your mouth. Um, so you shut your mouth. How can you say I go about things the wrong way? And it's just so beautiful. It's just so beautiful because, well, look, Ellie, just this week, you tagged me. I was on Facebook. You tagged me in a post about, I don't know, like someone was asking about marital advice or what do you do when you're scared about being married? I forget. It was something like that.
Hmm.
And you tagged me in my book, I think. And I was reading all the responses on
Right.
Facebook. A lot of it was like, do this. If you feel this, don't do that. And
Hmm.
I was just thinking about this line. It's like, shut up. First of all, you don't know this person. Okay. And it sounds like you're projecting all of your sort of personal experience and really anxiety on to someone else. And I like this idea of how can you say I go about things the wrong way? Is there really a right way or a wrong way to dealing with matters of the heart? I think there may be more efficacious ways or like more less anxious ways perhaps, but right or wrong, I'm not so sure, but we sure talk about it that way, right? The right way and the wrong way to do things. But
Right. Like the 10 things you should do in order to meet your one and only, or, here's the things that you shouldn't do on a date. Like those kinds of black and white things are pervasively out there. But you're right. I
well,
think the beauty of it is it's often just so much more creative and personal.
look, before I met Eliza, my understanding was that long distance relationships always don't work, or if they, or just avoid them at all possible costs. But what I discovered, and thank God, I didn't listen to some of this advice. What I discovered for my disposition, long distance worked great because we'd come in and see each other. I was commitment phobic, and so I would lose my mind for the first 48 hours, then I would adjust, and then I'd leave. And then I can lick my wounds for 6 weeks and then re-engage again. And that process of having a long time to come in and come out really worked for my disposition. And Ellie, this comes down to something we've talked about before. So much of this game about relationships and love and connection is that idea of know thyself. And the advice that gets handed down often has to be done in a way that it can't apply to all of the know thyself. It applies to a certain type of person, perhaps. And let's be honest, I mean, from politics to gender, I mean, the self-help world is geared towards a certain type of person generally. It just is. I wrote my first book because all the books on commitment phobia that I read when I was single, all the advice more or less sounded like this. If you're a woman dating a guy who's committed, run for the hills. That's how they all ended, right? Or they would say, like, they
Yeah.
would get much more pathological. It's very hard to deal with narcissistic personality disorder, but it was all bleak, and there really isn't much that you can do. So, anyways, again,
Meanwhile,
Morrissey.
just to throw in, like, I think that's such an interesting perspective in itself. And I think, you would probably say this too. Where's the book that's saying, why do you keep dating somebody who's commitment phobic, right? Like, what's your part in continuing to choose a partner who doesn't necessarily want to commit?
Well, they would touch on that.
Hmm.
They would touch on that, but very little of it was reciprocity. It was more like, I mean, some of the books would touch on it, but I didn't feel that these books that I was reading spoke about this. Not, they always would end with some idea that you have to get over this. You have to find a better way to deal with this. Well, as a matter of fact, the commitment phobe and the person hanging on too tight are actually dancing a good dance, or a maladaptive dance. And if you understand that we get caught in these maladaptive dances to a degree, right, then you don't get so bloody anxious when it's happening that there's something wrong with me. It's like, no, it's like the late David Snarch's line, which I love about marriage, is that we all marry for the wrong reasons. It takes staying married to sometimes find out what the right reasons are. I never heard that before. I heard, you better know why you're doing this, or
Right.
that idea that very few people, if any, know what the hell they're doing, because it's all projection. It's all fantasy and projection, and
Right.
hopes
And that it,
dreams.
sometimes a difficult relationship, or a relationship that seems like it won't work, if both people are open and willing and ready to grow, can actually grow into a tremendous relationship.
Well, that's David's line. That's that last part. It takes staying in something. And by the way, this is true. I find this is true as a guitar player. Sometimes I get stuck on something and I really wanted to give up. But if I learned that if I could just slow down and work through it, I learned something about myself, about grit.
Right.
And resilience. And I also learned that I could take my art form to a deeper place without abandoning the thing. So
Right.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that idea. But again, you asked, what is it about the song that moved me? If you listen to the song, it's not just the lyrics, but how Morrissey says it with that kind of snide sort of, you shut your mouth. And I just think I'd like to say it more, but I can't, because I can't. You can't do that. But I like
that
it.
might not go over so well in your therapy sessions with people,
or with some of my colleagues. Yes. Anything else from this song, Ellie, that you want to touch on?
I think the last piece for me is this: I'm human and I need to be loved just like everyone else does. I think part of the challenge is, and I'm actually curious what you would say about this to somebody who's in the dating experience, has this need for a relationship, but doesn't have a relationship. So, like, how do you manage that need? What do you do with that desire, or that human need to be loved, as he says, but you don't have a partner? And I think a lot of the time people run into a lot of more immature coping behaviors to regulate that need. But what would mature coping behaviors look like if you have a need to be loved but you don't have a partner?
So I think the first thing is that, and I know this is not politically correct, okay, Ellie, but there is something in our tradition, and I think there's wisdom to this, or deep wisdom to this. Not all relationships are the same. Okay, so let me just throw that out there. And the idea that, what is it? I forget exactly, but it's pshat. It's from Breshit, I think. Man shall not be alone, or man and woman shall. It's something about not being.
It's not good for humans to be alone, basically.
Right. And I think specifically the Torah is talking about intimate relation. They're not talking about friends. I think it's the Jewish Bible, the Torah, is specifically talking about that type of relationship. So there's a qualitative. So what I'm going to say, I just want to put a caveat. There's a qualitative difference, emotionally, clearly, sexually, cognitively, about a monogamous emotional commitment. However, I have found that there is meaning in exploring what the yearning is about with someone who is, at least the single people that I work with, when they're not connecting. The first thing is, what is the depths of your non-romantic relationships? Almost always they are shallow. So they might say, I'm close with my mother, my father, my brother, my sister. But when I actually explore with them, well, the depths of it, it's very shallow. Right. And so they have this fantasy that one day I will meet someone where I can really fully let down my guard. And of course, it's going to be intoxicating and torturing, right? Because it's always out of reach. So the first thing that I coach people on is the degree to which you can reveal yourself in a Martin Buber-esque I thou sort of a way, a deep, meaningful relationship with your siblings, your parents, or whomever is alive, okay, is the degree to which you'll be able to bring yourself into a romantic relationship. And another benefit of that is you will be less needy. So when you're dating and when you're going out, people can pick up, we can sniff out desperation. I'm sorry, folks, who's listening to this, if this happens to be you. The fact is that when you approach on a date, and by the way, how do I know this? Because I remember when I would show up on dates and I would be just a little too emotionally invested in making this work. And it gets in the way of, first of all, seeing clearly about, is this a good fit for me? Right. And it also drives certain people away because people don't like being pursued anxiously. Right. I mean, we want to feel like we're yearned for in some way, but we don't like when it's kind of like, you need to balance me in some way. So the first thing I think is, what is the status of your current relationships? And if you are distant or cut off from relationships in your life, you are going to double down on the meaning of a partner. And it's going to be much more, the vacuousness of it all is going to make finding someone so much more important, which even if you're lucky enough or blessed or whatever to meet someone, the relationship will be at risk because there's no way that relationship, that intimate relationship, is going to be able to fulfill the other relationships that are lacking.
So. Yeah, that's such a great point, because I definitely think that's such a powerful question for us to ask ourselves. Like, how many deep relationships do we have right now? And if the answer is 0, and you're looking for that one person that you're going to have the deep, meaningful relationship of a lifetime with, how are you going to know how to do that? Right? Like what, like what does that even mean exactly? And you're right, to put all of those eggs in one basket, meaning you have no other meaningful, deep relationships other than this one person, is such an interesting, way of thinking about love.
And the other thing about that relationship, if you find yourself in that relationship, which let's be clear. I mean, Ellie, my sample size is biased. I'm a relationship therapist, so people come and see me when they're in relationships. I don't know. I don't know how many people really are giving the old college try and they just can't meet someone. I don't know, but generally, I find people do at some point, and however they get there, they do. I'm actually thinking about men back in Vancouver when I was there. We were all single, every single one of us. We would show up to the same bloody programs and the same people. And when I look back now, all of us, literally to a man, have met someone in some capacity at a romantic level. I think that the problem here also is that when you finally meet someone, the whole relationship is teetering on a very, very precarious ledge, because what happens is you throw in all of your eggs into this one basket that somehow I am going to get some sort of an affirmation of goodness, of empathy, of whatever the case may be. And the one thing that we know about romantic relationships is we are going to disappoint each other over and over. Why? Because we're bloody human and we will disappoint. And the problem with that is, for some people in my office, when that disappointment comes, and it'll come, I'm sorry, folks, like if you think that there are some relationships where it's not happening, that is a lie. So long as there's illness, death, children, poverty, and war, there will be disappointment in your life, the bankruptcy, whatever. When that comes, you won't have the emotional antibodies to deal with it. And it'll become very personal. This is the couples I see in my office. It becomes very personal. How can you do this to me? You know how wounded I was, right? This is what Ed Friedman called the tyranny of empathy, is that you spend your whole time going, I need to feel everything you feel. Right. It's an endless bucket, and it buckles marriages and relationships. And so again, and it's counterintuitive. All of our relationships, friends, family, I have to say family would be, if I have to triage this, it would be family first. Friends are not family, and family's not friends. But the more you have roots into those, and you're working on those relationships, it improves everything else. It really does. Unfortunately, and Ellie, we've talked about this before, we live in a society
Mhm.
right now, and I'm not so sure how this gained purchase, but this is in the air, where the idea is that if you have toxic people in your life, you cut them out like a tumor. Yeah,
Mhm.
cut people out of your life like a tumor. I hear this about parents, I
Right.
mean, children to parents. I see therapists recommending this to people based on politics.
Mhm.
It's insanity to me. Insanity.
Right. Like the idea that non-perfect behavior
Not,
or
no, 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 not
ideology is
thoughts,
toxic.
thoughts,
Right.
not even behavior, thoughts. If your brother has a political thought, a religious thought, so you need to get, because it's so toxic, it's so traumatic, and
Right.
so people are listening to this going, whew, and this, I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. I know I'm not being hyperbolic, because I have
Right.
clients of mine who will say to me, oh no, it's good that I don't speak to anyone in my family because they're just toxic.
Right.
Now I see it, all of the facts of their life is a total disaster in terms of what's going on right now.
Right.
But it is a cultural thing right now. And then Dr. Bowen is probably rolling over in his grave as
Mhm.
cutoff is now seen as a virtuous thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's a different topic. So
Yeah, I think that's a great a great piece, in terms of looking at all of your other relationships and seeing the quality of those relationships. And now what are you expecting from your partner, and how balanced is that? How realistic is that? And how much are you cultivating meaningful relationships in your life so that when that person does come along, it fits and it works and you know how to do that, and you're not expecting them to be all things to you at all times, which is, I think, so important. And I would just throw in, like, when I sort of think about that question for myself in terms of how do you deal with those needs, like, the first thing is recognizing, like, I think so often now we have so many avoidances and coping mechanisms and things that we do that we can just run away from our needs 24/7. um, that if you're not really clear about what you need, you will not know how to get those needs met, and you will consistently feel that nothing is doing it for you, but that's mainly because you're actually not clear on what it is exactly that you need. So I think for me, that's also one of the things that I've been talking about with different people these days is, how do you get clear? What is it exactly that you need? Is it really a love relationship, or do you actually just need, like you said, more meaningful relationships in your life right now? So I think those are also really good questions. Yeah.
well,
Great
thank you,
song.
Morrissey, for opening up. Yeah, and Ellie, it's interesting. I don't know what for you. This is one of these timeless songs.
Hmm.
I listen to it now, and it still takes my heart
Oh
and
yeah.
rips it just a little. I'm married. I've got kids, and still I
Hmm.
listen to the song, and there's a longing and a sadness in the song that still touches me now in 2022. It's just
Mm,
such a fantastic piece of songwriting.
awesome. All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for listening and playing along with us on the Love Examined Playlist podcast. If you would like to recommend a topic or a song, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. All of the information is in the liner notes. If you want to find out more about what Avrum does or what I'm up to, you can also find that there as well. Please don't forget to listen, like, subscribe, review, all of those things. We really love getting your feedback, and we will see you all next week. Thanks, Avrum.